Grab your squared circles, Wargamers. Today, we're going to teach you how to win at RPGs by drilling down and focusing on one grossly misunderstood aspect of classic Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. From a top-down perspective, one of the reasons that old Mr. Wargaming wants you to understand this stuff is because it's perceived to be very deep and esoteric and complicated. It's really not. But because of that perception, if you sit down at a table and you're ready and prepared to do this stuff, then you can seriously throw the other players or the DM off of his game by insisting that you play the game that's advertised. Of course, we're talking about Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and we're talking about the unarmed combat rules. Grossly not misunderstood, perhaps malunderstood is a better way to put it. We will start, as Mr. Gygax, the OG EGG himself does, with pummeling. So we're going to try to knock out our opponent's teeth. And the two-hit is very simple. Forget magical protection, that doesn't count here. We're just talking about physical armor. If the guy you're attacking is wearing chainmail, with an AC of 6, that means you got a 60% chance of punching him to effect. Maybe you punch him in the brisket, but it doesn't matter, because all you're doing is punching his armor, okay? So remember, this is just to see if you hit. So you're trying to roll under that number. If you're trying to punch a guy who is completely unarmored, you got a 90% chance. You're actually going to do it. Once you've made that roll, then you're going to make another roll to see what the actual effect is. And of course, you got modifiers based on how strong you are, based on how nimble you are. So the pummeling table then says, hey, look, again, roll a percentile and add these modifiers. Here's where the armor really comes into play. If you've got a guy who's wearing a magical cloak or ring, you're going to subtract 30% from that roll. If a guy's wearing an open-faced helmet, you subtract 5%. If he's wearing a complete helmet, visored, eye slits, minus 20% to the effect. Now that you've got that second roll to find out the effect, you compare that to the pummeling table, and here you see what happens, right? If you've got a negative score, the blow missed, and your opponent gets a chance to punch you back. However, if you're between 0 and 20, maybe you kind of whiffed on him, maybe you hit him to no damage, but you get another chance to strike. This is all kind of an interrupt to the main sequence of combat, all right? Note here, there's a couple here where you've got, if you've got a glancing blow, you're off balance, series end. Now the next guy gets to try to counterpunch you. However, if your effect roll is over 100, if you're really strong, wouldn't be too hard. Notice, hit points of damage scored. Now everybody thinks that the easy way to run unarmed combat is just to use the open hand strike that monks use. Not so. A monk is only going to be able to do D3 damage with a successful 2-hit attack. If you're not a monk, you want to use the pummeling, because if you do get in that crushing blow, if you use this against an unarmored opponent, you got a 90% hit chance. Compare that to your normal THAC was going to be about 90%, so you're just as likely to hit. But take a look at this. If you've got, even if you roll like a 50% chance on your damage, with all of the usual modifiers against, say, a spellcaster, you're looking at doing a solid punch, strike again. You could do 8 plus your damage bonus, plus get to make another punch because you rung his bell so hard. So you see how this is some very powerful rules, Mojo. Insist on playing the game as it was intended. You're going to be playing at an elite level. It's going to open up all kinds of avenues for you. Likewise, if you are a DM, you want to use this against your PCs. If you've got a big group that outnumbers the PCs, send 2 of your enemies against each of the frontline fighters and try to get a couple of mooks against, sorry for the truck noise, you're right by the highways, you can see off to your left. You get a couple of mooks on a spellcaster, they got weapon speed of effectively 0. He ain't getting any spells off because he's going to be too busy punching and kicking his way out of that. Next thing we're going to look at, as Mr. Gygax does, is the grappling table. Now here, as you can see, you have the exact same base score to hit. The big deal is if you're trying to attack somebody with an AC of 0, you're going to have a 0% chance. The guys in armor are just not going to be phased by you trying to sweep the leg. All right, so but take a look at this. Same process where you've got your base score to grapple, except now strength doesn't matter so much. It's all about that dex, okay? Yeah, your base score is going to be, I should point out, in this case, the more armored they are, the easier you're going to have it to bring them down, okay? Because if they're wearing leather armor, they're going to be slowed. So your base chance to hit goes up by 10%. So a guy in leather armor is already a 70% chance. You add another 10, you got about an 80% chance. Likewise with chainmail, you're starting at a 60. No, it's 80% chance. If you've got a high dexterity, that goes up by, anywhere from 12 to 18%. You're almost guaranteed to do that. The one thing to pay attention to is that if the opponent's base movement is 3 inches or faster, right? So a guy that's moving at a standard 60 feet or 6 inches is going to have a bonus of, it's going to knock 20% off. So speed, dexterity effects. And then we look down at the next table. And again, you roll your percentile. If you get below that number, cool. Move on to roll it again. And this time you're going to roll and you're going to add for your dexterity. Oh, but it's your attackers. You get to add your strength for the effect. If your opponent is stunned, and remember that number, okay? You're going to add 20% to your percentile roll if your opponent is stunned or helpless. Weight difference becomes important here, right? You don't want a whole lot of kobolds trying to tackle a full-grown 280-pound dude, because it's going to go poorly for them. What else do we got? We got opponent dexterity per point over 14. And then, of course, if your opponent is wearing armor, you're going to subtract from this because it's actually harder to get them locked up. So you can hit, but the effect is going to be less. Then we take a look at the grappling table. So you take that score, all right? So you've rolled to see what the effect is. You've applied your modifiers. You take a look at this table. And basically, the higher roll is better. And this tells you what kind of lock you have. And if you succeed in getting a lock, which is not going to be that hard, you're going to be doing hit point damage every round, all right? Then the other guy gets a chance to get a lock on you. And if he gets a higher adjusted dice score than you, then he basically pulls a reverse. So if all you manage is an arm lock, 20 to 40 on your percentile die, and then he gets a headlock, oh my gosh. So you do your 2 points of damage plus your strength, but if he then gets you in a headlock, now he's got control. And when you go on to the next round of combat, he is guaranteed to do 5 hit points of damage plus a strength bonus every round. You're going to try to counter, but you got to hope you get better than him, okay? And one of the things to be aware of here is that once he's locked up, oh, guess what? That pretty much counts as being stunned. So a second guy dogpiling him now gets that 20% bonus we talked about earlier. This is where having more dudes on hand comes in handy. Not only that, remember that if you are laying on the ground engaged in some, sweaty man wrestling UFC style, if you're outnumbered and you're laying on the ground, all of your opponent's friends are just going to get to walk up and just shank you right in the back. This is a very important rule. If you send a single ogre against a party of 5 PCs, and 3 of them jump on top of him, all you need is one guy to get a grapple lock on him, and guy number 4 has got free backstabs. Kebab, 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 that ogre is going down. You as the DM don't want to throw one unprotected enemy at the PCs who know how to grapple. You better send in a bunch of flanking mooks to prevent that from happening, because this is powerful play right here. The last thing we're going to look at is overbearing, and this is where numbers really come in handy, because now you're not just trying to wrestle with a guy, you're trying to get him down on the ground, and this is where that stunning really comes into play. Base score to hit for overbearing. We're just trying to get our opponent on the ground here. The attacker strength per point, they get 1%. If your opponent is slowed or 1 foot held, wait a second. If we throw a couple of goblins at a frontline fighter and they wrestle him and one of those goblins gets a foot lock on the guy, remember that's near the top of the chart for wrestling. Now when his buddy comes in to overbear, he's got an additional 10% chance to hit him. His target number goes up by 10%. If he's leaping in, he's up to 25% chance. His likelihood of succeeding here is up to 25%. If I've got 3 goblins jumping on him, and oh, by the way, once an opponent is overborn, some other form of combat must take place. So you only get one chance to do this. But, you know, the key here is it's as simple as the other processes. You roll to hit, you roll to your effect. Let's take a look real quick at, now, you know, again, if you're trying to tackle an ogre, take a look at how low these bonuses are, right? Even a giant with a strength of 20, he's only going to be reduced by minus 24%. Well, that's pretty huge, man. He's only going down by 20%. All right. Take a look at the overbearing table. Take a look at the results, right? If you score under 21% on that effect, you're not doing any damage. But slip down and grab leg. Oh, you're not overborn yet. Look at that. Anything under a 40, you've grabbed a leg. And so when the next goblin jumps on top of your knight, he's going to get that 1 foot held. He's going to get that 10% increase. Right? And if he's jumping in, he's back up to that plus 25%. You don't have to worry about, oh, do I hit? You know, oh, they got a Thaco. It's AD&D. We don't use Thacos. But, oh, he's got to roll a 19 to hit? Oh, no. All he's got to do is overbear. Hit points of damage, right? Opponent staggered. And by the way, if your opponent's staggered, you roll under a 60, you get to attack again. You get another chance. You bring your opponent to the knees, he counts as stunned. Well, oh, I'm sorry, over 100 if he's knocked flat, stunned for 1 round. You're doing 4 damage to him already, and now he's stunned. He counts as helpless. You can send your guys in, and you go back to the pummeling table, and what you find is when you're trying to pummel a guy who is helpless, plus 30% on the pummeling table. Plus 30%. You are guaranteed to get a glancing blow, which is 2 plus your strength bonus. Guaranteed. Powerful play here, guys. And it's not complicated. One last little wrinkle here that we should talk about. Well, there's 2. We're going to talk about the random factor and monks. And the random factor is this. We got to look at the matrix table for this, because you roll, if you're the attacker, you roll a d6. All right, so remember let me back up a step. Remember I said there were 2 rolls that you were making, 2 hit and effect. Okay, you're going to roll a d6 and you're going to add your attack column. Let's take a look at the attack column here real quick for monsters. They have, you know, anybody up to is hit dice of up to 1. See these columns here? Up to 1 minus 1. They're going to get a plus 1 on that roll. The attacker rolls a d6. Defender rolls a d4. A monster with a hit die of 1 is going to add 3 to that roll. And then that percentile can be used either as the attacker, you can use that percentile to add to your roll to hit or to your roll for effect. Likewise, your defender with a d4 plus your column is going to be able to use that number to reduce the roll that the attacker is making, either as 2 hit or as effect. Already you see that PCs are at a bit of a disadvantage, because remember that your thief, let's say, his first column, he only gets plus 1 through 4th level. It's not until level 5 that he gets a plus 2 on these checks. All right? Whereas your monsters, just your standard orc, gets a plus 3% to his attack roll or his effect roll. Or when he's defending, it's going to be a minimum of 4, right? Because it's the 3rd column. It's going to be a minimum of 1 on that die roll plus 3. So not huge, but it is just that one little extra bit. Why would a monk want to use this? Because of one last little rule that we should talk about. Even if they are already grappled, pummeled, or overborn, monks are able to conduct open hand combat normally until stunned or unconscious. Right? So even if they're stunned, when their opponent says, I'm grappling, then the opponent grapples, the monk counter grapples, and even if the monk is already held tight and fast, he still gets to make his normal 2-hit attack. Right? So he's got an extra chance to be doing damage, even if he's stuck in an armbar by an Umber Hulk. That's a pretty sweet deal right there, and that really adds to the effect of monks, okay? Particularly because a monk, if he can grapple and hold that grapple, On subsequent turns, while he's got an enemy spellcaster in a chokehold, even if he's grappled himself, he can counterattack. And again, when you look at weapon speeds, when you look at segments, that means he's cutting off any ability for that spellcaster to do any kind of support, any kind of boom against the PCs. Likewise, your enemies locking down a wizard. Your high-level wizards aren't as tough as you think they are, guys. Yeah, they can slap down a lot of damage, but you send up a normal crew with just a couple of, wrestle kobolds to go jump him, it's going to go bad. I once played in a campaign with a guy who, when he realized how powerful this was, he hired 4 sumo wrestlers to follow him around and then just dogpile any enemies that he could find. They were sumo wrestlers, high strength, low AC. They just grapple until the DM was able to come up with a counter, which effectively, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to handle that, but, I'll leave that as an exercise for the viewer. The key takeaway here is that unarmed combat in AD&D has an undeserved reputation as being needlessly complicated. It's simple. Crack your book to page 72, roll percentile to hit, percentile for effect. Read the charts, you're off to the races, you're gaming at an elite level. And if you are playing against basic level players or a basic level DM, brother, you are going to be handing their hats to them on a regular basis, and you are going to be stacking that gold and stacking that XP. So go forth, implement these rules into your game. The grass will be greener, the food will taste better, and the girls will be prettier. And all you had to do was play the game by the rules. Not play the game that you wish it was. Play the game as it is. That is how you win at RPGs. Till next time, I'm praying for you.